The measuring tape never lied. Naomi had built her entire career on that truth. Fabric didn't have motives. Numbers didn't deceive. In a world full of people who said one thing and meant another, a clean measurement was the closest thing to honesty she had ever found. That was before her sleeve slipped. One moment she was leaning in to capture the exact circumference of a man's wrist. The next, the room stopped breathing. Every guard reached for their weapon in the same instant, a single, synchronized motion, like a machine switching states. Kenji didn't move. He stood shirtless in the blue studio light, his black tattoo sleeve gleaming, and looked down at the pale, jagged scar running up her inner forearm. Then, without a word, he turned his back to her. Naomi saw it immediately. There, carved into the muscle of his lower back, slicing through the edge of the tattoo like a wound the ink had grown around, was the exact same mark. Same diagonal angle. Same brutal depth. Same faint, geometric precision at the healed ridge. Her voice came out barely above a breath. "Sir, that scar. I have the same one." The silence that followed was the kind that comes before something irreversible. Kenji turned back. His expression was not fury. It was something far more unsettling. The face of a man seeing something he had been told was impossible. "Who put that mark on you?" he asked. "And why are you still alive?" The elevator opened onto a floor that didn't appear in the building's public directory. Naomi stepped out into a space built like a Kyoto tea house reimagined in glass and cedar. Warm light, filtered air, the faint smell of sandalwood, and something colder underneath it. Gun oil. The floor-to-ceiling windows turned San Francisco into a carpet of fallen stars 40 stories below. She clutched her leather kit. $25,000 for a single fitting. Encrypted referral. No name. Dress code, black, professional, no jewelry. She had taken strange commissions before. She had never taken one that came with a metal detector and 4 men who watched her hands the entire time she unpacked her chalk. She kept her face neutral. She kept her breathing even. She was a professional. Then he walked in. Kenji was the kind of still that only comes from absolute certainty of power. Lean, shirtless, wrapped in black ink from wrist to shoulder, a geometric tattoo sleeve that looked less like decoration and more like armor. He didn't greet her. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he hasn't yet decided is a threat. "Begin," he said. His voice was a frequency more than a sound. Naomi moved toward him, yellow measuring tape around her neck, chalk in her left hand. She could feel every eye in the room tracking her. She worked the way she always worked, methodically, quietly, without unnecessary motion. She draped fabric. She noted numbers. She breathed. She reached for his left arm to take the sleeve measurement. Without thinking, she pushed her own sleeve back to keep it clear of his watch. The room detonated into silence. Kenji's eyes dropped to her inner forearm. His entire body went rigid, not the freeze of fear, but the complete arrest of a man whose mind has just encountered something that should not exist. He grabbed her wrist, not violently, with the absolute certainty of a man who needed to look closer. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. Naomi looked down at the scar she had looked at 10,000 times. The pale, ugly ridge she had carried since she was 7 years old. The one her mother called her badge of strength. "An accident," she said. "When I was little. A kitchen fire." Kenji released her wrist. He said nothing. He turned his back to her. And that was when Naomi saw what was carved into his lower back. She counted them. 7 full seconds of silence before anyone breathed. The guards hadn't lowered their weapons. They were waiting for one word, a word Kenji hadn't given yet. Naomi could see their knuckles white on the grips. She could feel the laser point that had to be hovering somewhere on her chest. She did not scream. She did not run. She understood instinctively that movement was the wrong answer in this room. Kenji turned back. His face was a controlled mask, but something had cracked behind his eyes. She couldn't name it yet. It wasn't rage. It was older than rage. "Lower them," he said. "Sir, the protocol." "Lower them." The weapons dropped. The tension didn't. It redistributed itself through the room like pressure finding new cracks. Kenji walked to a heavy oak chair. He sat down slowly, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. He looked at Naomi the way a man looks at a safe he wasn't expecting to find already open. "Sit down." Her legs carried her to the velvet stool across from him. She sat on the edge of it, spine straight, hands folded in her lap, the same posture she used when clients were difficult. "Project Calm. Absorb nothing. Who told you it was a kitchen fire?" Kenji asked. "My mother. And a kitchen fire," he said softly, "leaves a burn. It leaves something ragged and uneven." He paused. "Look at your scar, Naomi. Look at it like you're looking at someone else's." She looked. She had never looked at it that way before. The line was too clean, too precisely angled. The ridge at the base too uniform. She had always assumed the medical attention had smoothed it. She had never questioned the shape. The first cold thread of doubt moved through her. "Who was your mother?" Kenji asked. "Diane. She was a nurse. She raised me alone in Oakland." Kenji was quiet for a moment. He picked up a glass of water from the side table and held it without drinking, watching the light move through it. "Did she ever use another name?" he asked. "Before you were born." "Something she put away." Naomi's throat tightened. She thought of a rainy afternoon 3 years ago, cleaning out her mother's apartment after the funeral. A hollowed-out book. An old insurance card tucked inside it, handwritten. Not Diane. A different name entirely. "Hannah Mori," she said, before she could stop herself. Kenji set the glass down. The sound it made against the table was like a gavel. "How do you know that name?" Naomi asked. Kenji didn't answer immediately. He looked at the window. He looked at her reflection in it. Then he turned back, and the mask had shifted, still controlled, but carrying something underneath it now. Something that looked almost like grief. "Because Hannah Mori," he said, "was the most gifted intelligence operative my father ever trusted. She knew every account, every secret, every weakness this organization was built on." He paused. "And she was the woman who vanished the night my father's compound burned, along with her infant daughter." The room seemed to contract. Naomi felt the walls of her professional composure developing hairline fractures. "Everyone believed they died in the fire," Kenji said. "For 20 years. He looked directly at her forearm. "That mark is not from a kitchen accident. It is a blood seal. My father placed it on the children of his inner circle, a mark of lineage, of belonging. He only ever sealed 2 children." He rolled his sleeve back and pointed to the symbol buried deep in the geometric tattoo at his shoulder. Small, precise, unmistakable. "Me. And the daughter who was supposed to be dead." Before Naomi could process a single word of what she had just heard, the security panel on the wall erupted in red. "Thermal breach," a guard barked. "Roof access. They're already in the shafts." The luxury of the penthouse became a war zone without transition. The glass wall to the east detonated inward. 6 figures dropped from the ceiling on silent lines, matte black armor, night vision goggles burning green in the dark. They moved like people who had memorized this room. Kenji was already moving. He swept Naomi behind the heavy mahogany workbench in one motion. She hit the floor as the first exchange of gunfire split the air above her. She pressed her cheek against the cold hardwood. Pins scattered from her overturned kit. Her chalk rolled under the baseboard. Everything she had built her quiet, precise life around was on the floor around her, useless. The fight lasted less than 90 seconds. Kenji's guards were elite and brutal. 3 of the attackers went down. The remaining 3 retreated into the vents, vanishing as cleanly as they had arrived. "Clear." The backup generators hummed to life. Emergency lighting bathed the room in dim red. Kenji stood in the wreckage, chest heaving, a thin line of blood running down his shoulder from a graze. Naomi stood up. Her knees were shaking. She stepped around a broken chair and caught her foot on something. She looked down. A dead attacker's arm, flung out across the floor. Her tailor's instinct, that reflex that noticed thread count from across a room, made her eyes drop to his wrist. A watch. Heavy. Gold. Custom engraved. The sunburst crest worked into the face in the specific style she had seen only once before. On the photographs Kenji's assistant had shown her as reference material for the commission. A Syndicate Council watch. given only to the highest-ranking members of the inner circle. She reached down and turned it over. On the back of the clasp, 2 initials were engraved in clean Roman script. MT. Are you hurt? She looked up. Kenji was standing over her, his expression stripped back to pure function. Assessing, calculating. She straightened up and looked at him. The watch felt like a burning coal in her awareness. I'm fine, she said. She did not show him the watch. She did not tell him about the initials. If the people who knew exactly which floor to enter and which exit Kenji would use had a council watch, then the call was coming from inside the house. And she could not trust anyone, including the man sharing her scar, until she understood the full shape of the room. We moved to the safe house, Kenji said, already pulling her toward the exit. Now. Naomi followed, but she kept her eyes moving across the remaining guards as they cleared the room. One of them was wearing gloves that matched the dead man on the floor. Naomi's entire origin is a fabrication. Diane was Hannah Mori, a syndicate intelligence operative who discovered a financial conspiracy, filed an internal complaint that was buried, and was then marked for death. She faked the fire, changed her identity, and raised Naomi in deliberate obscurity. The scar was not an accident. It was placed on Naomi deliberately as a blood seal, a mark of inner circle lineage that cannot be forged or removed. What changes? Naomi is not a civilian. She is syndicate royalty by birth, which means she has been a target for 20 years without knowing it. New question: who inside the syndicate ordered Hannah Mori's death? And do they know she is sitting in this building right now? The armored SUV moved through the wet streets like a sealed room. Rain hammered the roof. Naomi sat as far from Kenji as the seat allowed. She kept her arm pressed against her body. Her mind kept returning to the initials on the clasp. MT. Kenji was silent, staring at nothing through the rain-streaked window. The graze on his shoulder had soaked through the temporary dressing. He hadn't complained. He didn't seem to notice. Let me, Naomi said. She moved closer, pulling the first aid kit from under the seat. Her hands were steady. They had learned steadiness the way a musician learns scales, through repetition and necessity. She peeled back the ruined dressing and began to clean the wound. To work, she needed light. She angled her phone toward his shoulder. And that was when the geometric tattoo shifted into focus at close range. She had seen it before, but not like this. Not from 3 inches away. Deep in the pattern, worked into the swirling black ink near his shoulder blade with the kind of precision that takes hours, a symbol. Compact and exact. The same shape as her scar. It's a memorial, Kenji said. He hadn't looked at her. My father outlawed the burning after my generation. But he kept the symbol in the design. He believed he was preserving a lineage he thought was already gone. Naomi worked in silence for a moment. The secret in her chest was getting heavier. The man on the floor, she said carefully. The one closest to the workbench. Kenji's head turned slowly. He was wearing a council watch. Gold, sunburst crest, engraved clasp. She paused, and then said the initials the way you say something you cannot take back. MT. The SUV swerved slightly. The driver caught it immediately. Kenji went completely still in the specific way she had come to understand meant the most danger. Not the stillness of calm, but the stillness of absolute, focused rage finding its shape. Marcus Tau, he said. The sound of it was barely human. Your head of security? 14 years, Kenji said. He taught me to shoot. He was at my father's funeral. A pause. He carried the casket. Naomi tied off the dressing. I'm a tailor. I noticed the engraving on a watch clasp the way you notice a person reaching for a weapon. I'm certain. Kenji leaned back and closed his eyes. Just for a moment. The betrayal moved across his face like weather. Then his phone buzzed. He pulled it out. His expression didn't change. He showed Naomi the screen. Marcus Tau. He answered. He put it on speaker. He said nothing. Kenji. Marcus's voice was warm with practiced relief. Thank God. I heard about the breach. I'm securing the perimeter at the coastal safe house now. I'm glad you made it through the south exit safely. The driver's eyes found Kenji's in the rearview mirror. Kenji's voice came out perfectly smooth. Thanks, Marcus. See you soon. He ended the call. The silence in the car was total. We didn't use the south exit, Naomi said. No, Kenji said. We didn't. And we never told anyone we were going to the coast. No, he said again. We didn't. He looked out at the rain. He's been running the exits for years. He's been running all of it. The coastal safe house was concrete in shadow, pressed into the cliff above the Pacific. Cold air. The sound of waves hitting rock far below. Naomi stood at the window and watched the fog move in off the water. Her reflection stared back at her, still in her tailor's blazer, measuring tape around her neck, looking absurd and right at the same time. Behind her, Kenji worked at the steel table. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the same precision she used on fabric. Found it, he said quietly. A document, buried under 14 years of administrative scar tissue. A complaint filed by Hannah Mori, names, account numbers, transaction records showing a consistent, sophisticated drain from the syndicate's loyalty reserves. The name of the accused was blacked out. She tried, Naomi said. Her voice felt stripped down to the wires. She went through the right channels first. She trusted the system. And someone with access to the system buried it, Kenji said. And then buried her. Headlights cut through the fog outside. Gravel popped under tires. Naomi was at the window before Kenji moved. He wasn't called. He wasn't told where we were going. Kenji closed the laptop. He stood up and straightened his shirt. Act like everything is fine. We need him to believe he still controls the room. The door opened. Marcus Tao walked in wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit, his silver hair immaculate, his expression warm with manufactured concern. He looked like someone's father arriving at a hospital. Kenji, he said, reaching for Kenji's shoulder. Thank God. I've been running your tracker since the breach. I was terrified I'd lost you. Naomi stepped forward automatically, the tailor's reflex, reaching for the coat. As Marcus shrugged it off, his shirt cuff moved. A flash of white fabric, and on it, a faint smear of blue, the specific, archival shade used only on documents in the syndicate's classified record room. He had been in the archives today. After the breach, while Kenji was bleeding in the back of an SUV, Marcus Tao had gone to the records room. You've had a full day, Marcus, Naomi said. Her voice came out clean and steady. She surprised herself. Marcus's smile didn't move. But his eyes changed. Something behind them shuddered. Warmth out, calculation in. Kenji stepped forward. My father didn't have a heart attack. The room became a different room. Marcus was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he straightened. He let the warm smile drop entirely and stood up taller. And that was somehow worse than any threat. The face of a man who has decided the performance is over. Your father, Marcus said, was going to dismantle everything I built because a woman whispered numbers in his ear. Hannah Mori found a discrepancy in the loyalty accounts and ran to him like a child running to a teacher. He took 1 step toward the door, his exit, his control. I had her removed. I had the complaint buried. And I spent 14 years making sure this organization remained functional while you were busy being sentimental about blood seals and dead fathers. He pulled the remote from his jacket. And now I'm going to finish it cleanly. What changes? The dead man's switch is a secondary revelation. The primary one is that Kenji's father did not die of natural causes. Marcus poisoned him over 18 months because Kenji's father believed Hannah Mori, reopened the complaint, and began to trace the accounts himself. Marcus didn't just corrupt the syndicate. He hollowed it out from the inside across 2 generations, killing every person who came close to the truth. Why unexpected? Marcus has been framed as the grieving loyalist who carried the casket. The depth of the betrayal, spanning the deaths of both Kenji's father and Naomi's mother, recontextualizes every prior scene and hits both characters simultaneously. New question. How do 2 people with no resources and no allies they can trust dismantle a man who has been building this trap for 14 years? The guards locked Marcus in the basement. But the walls of the safe house didn't feel safer. Kenji stood with his back to the room, one hand pressed flat against the concrete wall. Naomi could see the tension in his shoulders, the specific set of them that meant he was working through something he couldn't punch his way out of. 12 hours, he said. If he misses the check-in, the file goes live. Every law enforcement channel in the country. Then we get ahead of it, Naomi said. We have nothing to get ahead of it with. He spent 14 years building the dead man's switch. Whatever evidence my father's people ever gathered, Marcus has had 14 years to destroy it. Naomi was quiet. She was looking at the wall, but she was seeing a small apartment in Oakland. Her mother at an old sewing machine near the window. The way her hands moved, methodical, precise, unhurried. Hannah Morey's hands. An intelligence operative's hands. She told me something once, Naomi said. I thought she was talking about clothes. She paused. She said, if you ever lose your way, look where the fabric meets the lining. Kenji turned around. She wasn't talking about clothes, Naomi said. She thought about what she knew about her mother. A woman who had discovered a conspiracy, filed a complaint, watched it get buried, and understood she was about to be killed. A woman with an infant daughter and an intelligence operative's mind. Hannah Morey would not have simply run. She would have prepared. She would have built something, carefully, quietly, over years, and she would have made sure Naomi could find it, if Naomi ever ended up in a room where finding it mattered. She kept a storage unit, Naomi said. Unit 412 in Oakland. She paid for it in cash, 15 years in advance. I cleared it out after she died. I thought it was old sewing patterns and nursing scrubs. She looked at Kenji. I didn't look at the lining. They drove through the dark with 3 pairs of headlights behind them before they'd cleared the city limits. Marcus's people. Watching the storage unit. Watching everything connected to Hannah Morey's former life. Watching for exactly this. Kenji, Naomi said, eyes on the mirror. I see them. He drove faster. Naomi kept her eyes on the clock on the dashboard. 11 hours and 14 minutes. The highway opened up and the city fell away behind them, and the dark pressed in from all sides. They lost 2 of the 3 trailing cars in the industrial district east of the bay. The third followed them all the way to the storage facility as the first gray light began bleeding into the horizon. Kenji was out of the car before it stopped moving. Naomi hit the gravel running, her keys already in her hand. The rows of storage units stretched ahead in the pre-dawn dark, metal doors orange under the overhead floods. Unit 412. She found it at the end of the 3rd row. Her hands were shaking. She had not let them shake until now. She pressed the key in, turned it, threw the door open. The unit was exactly as she remembered, packed boxes, the smell of cedar and old paper, the quiet of a room where nothing had moved in years. At the back, against the wall, her mother's old sewing cabinet. Walnut wood. Bowed front panel. The one that had sat in the corner of their Oakland apartment for as long as Naomi could remember. Fabric and lining, she said to herself. Behind her, the 3rd set of headlights swung through the entrance to the facility. A car door opened. Then 2 more. Find it, Kenji ordered, positioning himself at the entrance. Naomi moved to the cabinet. She ran her hands over the surface, grains, seams, joints. Nothing. She pulled the drawers. Old thread. Folded paper patterns. Nothing. She flipped the cabinet forward onto its face. The impact sent dust into the air. And on the underside of the base panel, hidden beneath a strip of age-darkened velvet that matched the interior lining, her fingers found a recessed latch. It clicked. The panel opened. Inside, not paper. A sealed, ruggedized laptop and a set of encrypted drives. Labeled in her mother's handwriting. Dated over 14 years. Hannah Morey had not just run. She had spent 14 years building the case from the outside, systematically, patiently, the way a tailor builds a garment 1 seam at a time. Naomi opened the laptop. The screen came on. Uploading, she said. I need 2 minutes. The first shot of the morning hit the light fixture above the door. Glass came down like rain. Naomi kept her hands on the keyboard. Kenji was at the door, returning fire with the cold precision of a man who had been trained for exactly this. She could hear the rhythm of it, controlled, measured, nothing wasted. The upload bar moved. 30%. 50%. She kept her eyes on the screen. She refused to look at anything else. A folder appeared at the top of the drive, titled in her mother's handwriting, "The Blood Seal." She opened it. A letter, dated 3 weeks before her mother's death. Her eyes moved across the words faster than she had ever read anything. Hannah Mori had known she was dying. Not from illness. She had understood that Marcus's reach would eventually find her, no matter how carefully she had hidden. So she had written this letter for the daughter she knew would one day end up in a room where it mattered, and she had hidden it in the only place she trusted Naomi to eventually look. The blood seal was not a wound. Her mother had not marked her to hide her identity. She had marked her to activate something, a clause in the syndicate's founding charter, written by the 5 original members, which held that the bloodline of any founding member could not be displaced or overridden by any internal council action. It was the one legal architecture Marcus had never been able to touch, because it required the heir to physically present the seal. The heir, not Kenji, both of them, and the letter's final paragraph. Your father was not a stranger. He was one of the 5. He built the financial architecture Marcus later corrupted. He died believing his daughter had died with me in the fire. His share of the founding charter, his vote, his claim, it belongs to his bloodline. It belongs to you. Naomi set the letter down inside herself and felt something rearrange. She was not the daughter of a nurse from Oakland. She was the heir of a founding member, carrying a mark her mother had placed on her with full knowledge of what it would one day unlock. She had not stumbled into this room by accident. She had been aimed at it. I'm not the victim, she said, to no one, to herself, to the woman who had engineered this from beyond the grave. I'm the heir. The upload bar hit 99%. Battery, 1%. Outside, a heavy engine. The grinding of a large vehicle maneuvering. A truck, backing toward the entrance of the unit, intending to ram it. Naomi! Kenji's voice cracked through the gunfire. She looked at the screen. One file. The final file. The one that would lock Marcus out of every account, every channel, every lever of power he had spent 14 years building. The truck hit the outer gate. Metal screamed. Her finger hit the key. The screen went black. What changes? Naomi was never a civilian who wandered into danger. She was an instrument her mother spent 15 years calibrating, marked deliberately, hidden carefully, and aimed at exactly this convergence. The scar is not a wound. It is a key, and the founding charter it unlocks is the one thing Marcus Tau cannot override, forge, or destroy. Why unexpected? The story has framed Naomi as reactive, processing revelations as they arrive. The final twist reframes her as the central mechanism of a plan that predates tonight by 2 decades. Her mother was the most dangerous person in the story, and she never appeared on screen. Emotional payoff. Naomi's grief for her mother transforms. It does not disappear, but it finds a shape, not the grief of a daughter who was lied to, but the grief of a daughter who finally understands the depth of what she was given. The data cleared the server in the final second before the truck breached the gate. Kenji pulled Naomi flat as the unit's outer wall buckled inward, the sewing cabinet exploding into splinters above them. Then silence, the sudden, absolute silence of men whose phones had just buzzed simultaneously with notifications that made their orders irrelevant. Every account Marcus had built was frozen. Every file he had planned to weaponize was already reframed by Hannah Mori's counter-archive, released simultaneously to the syndicate's private network and 3 secured legal repositories. Marcus Tau's faction collapsed within the hour, not with violence, but with the quiet, catastrophic speed of men turning on each other the moment the leverage disappeared. Marcus himself didn't fight his detention. He sat in the concrete room below the coastal safe house and looked at the wall and understood that a woman he had killed 20 years ago had just destroyed him. At dawn, Naomi and Kenji stood in the ruins of the penthouse. The contractors would arrive in hours. The silver light coming through the fractured floor-to-ceiling glass turned the wreckage into something almost beautiful. Kenji looked at the scar on her forearm. She looked at the mark buried in his ink. He said it simply, the founding charter is restored. It requires both bloodline signatures for any structural change. I cannot rebuild this without you. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her mother, the woman who had carried this secret alone for 20 years, who had sewed it into the lining of an ordinary life and trusted that her daughter would find it when it mattered. She thought about what it meant to be handed something that heavy and choose to carry it anyway. My mother spent 20 years making sure I could walk into that room, Naomi said. She didn't do it so I could walk back out. Kenji held out the tablet. The founding charter, reformatted. 2 signature lines. Naomi looked at her measuring tape, lying on the charred table where she had set it 12 hours ago. The worn yellow tape. The weight of the old life. The thing she had held on to because it was the most honest thing she knew. She picked it up, felt the familiar weight of it in her hand. Then she set it back down. She reached for the pen. She wasn't here to measure anymore. She was here to build.